Robert, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Nice to see you, Michael.
So today was the first day back for the Ontario Legislature, but really missing in action. Don't have to tell you, we're both the Ontario Premier and his Health Minister. Is there any other reason for those absences other than the summons, which was issued yesterday by the Rouleau inquiry?
Well, clearly that's why the Premier wasn't in the House today. And Michael, this is the first time that the MPPs have been back in 6 weeks, more than 6 weeks. They had a break during the municipal elections here in Ontario. So we were expecting to see the Premier. Now, I'm told that Sylvia Jones, the former Solicitor General, who was also summoned to appear, she's now the Health Minister, she's off sick today, apparently. So that's why she's not here. But the Premier certainly is around because one of my colleagues was trying to get him at a speech he was giving at the Toronto Board of Trade that was closed to the media, as these speeches often are. No, not. So this is a very unusual time. I mean, we haven't really seen Ford duck the media like this in years, literally in years, since the earliest times in office, 2018, 2019, when they had a lot of problems. They seem to have weathered a lot of those problems. You know, there've been a big change in staffing in the Premier's office, and the Premier himself has sort of, the pandemic, I think, made him more comfortable governing. I think this situation where they are going to court to avoid testifying at the Emergencies Act inquiry is because, remember, Ford was one of the only premiers, if not the only premier, to support Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's invoking of that act. Ford's government had its own emergencies legislation that went into effect, and they changed some laws after the Ambassador Bridge blockade in Windsor, between Windsor and Detroit. So it's very curious, and it's almost like they just don't want to set a precedent of having the Premier under oath and being cross-examined because they're concerned that a lawyer might take him down a rabbit hole. But the political optics are really bad for the Tories, and it was left to Government House Leader Paul Callander to answer the questions, and he looked pretty unhappy having to answer these tough questions today in the legislature and from reporters. Yeah, tough questions, as you say, and I am kind of wondering about what arguments we're hearing at this point, because this has happened in quick succession, right? Like, I mean, the Commission essentially issues a summons yesterday afternoon. Within an hour, there's this pushback from both Ford and Jones. So in pushing back against that summons, I'm kind of wondering, what kind of argument is the Ontario government making? Instead of them appearing, what arguments are they making for not showing up? They're saying that they're cooperating by giving cabinet documents, that they have senior officials, deputy ministers and the like appearing. Their answer is that it's a policing matter, not a political matter. And I mean, what we've seen from the inquiry is that Ottawa Police messed up. The Ontario Provincial Police may have messed up. Ottawa City Council messed up, and it looks like the provincial and federal governments also messed up. So there's a lot of blame to go around. So I assume that perhaps Ford doesn't want to be blamed. But I think this is one of these situations, Michael, where it's, you know, I don't want to say the cover-up is worse than the crime, but it's almost worse for them not to show up than to just show up and take their lumps. I actually, unlike the Premier's advisors, I actually think that he would be fine on the stand because I've seen him up close during the pandemic where he had to take a lot of tough questions on a lot of tough issues, and he managed well enough that he was reelected in June with more seats than they had before the election. Although there is... So you have confidence in, but you know, there is also the point, the fact that Ford, as you know, just last week said that he was not asked to testify before the Commission. Yeah. But apparently he was, so that's another wrinkle to this. What's being said about that? Yeah. I think he's splitting hairs because remember in Canada on October 17th, so 8 days ago, the Premier said, I'm not being asked to testify, and that's not true. He was asked. Now, his office says, look, he was asked to do a pre-interview for testimony, but that's not the same thing as testifying. Because I've been hammering them on this for about a week now because of what he said in Canada. I was curious because in the summer, I remember the Premier indicating that he would be quite happy to testify. And of course, that Canada event, Trudeau was with him on the stage there at the Nokia announcement about research and development program there. And the Premier said, I stood shoulder to shoulder with the Prime Minister. That clip went all around the country. So I think I was curious that Ford is splitting hairs. Now, his office is saying he was not asked to formally testify until after he made that statement. But I think that they're, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin kind of play here.
Yeah, so you're quickly running out of time, Robert, but what are you watching out for then? Because, the Rouleau inquiry doesn't really have much of a timeline to hear from witnesses.
No, exactly. And this thing is really compressed, Michael. I mean, the blockade took 3 weeks, and it's a 6-week inquiry. We're going to be watching for the legal fight. If I were Doug Ford, I would go to the inquiry, I would testify, and I would say, yeah, I supported the use of the Emergencies Act because as events proved, nothing was happening. It was a 3-week stalemate, and we needed to, the Prime Minister needed to do what he had to do. Trudeau himself is going to testify, and I actually think that Trudeau will benefit politically from this, because I think if you get outside the sort of bubble of revisionist history that we're seeing right now from people saying, oh, it was heavy-handed, we didn't need to do that, we already had these laws at our disposal. Well, nothing was happening. It was a logjam, and I think the residents of Ottawa, downtown, near where you guys are right now, they'll testify, as some have already, that nothing was happening, and the OPP wasn't doing its job, the Ottawa Police Service wasn't doing its job, so something needed to happen. Ford at the time said the act was necessary. Mm-hmm. Trudeau said it was necessary. I don't understand why Ford wouldn't just go to testify to agree with what he said at the time.
Well, we are watching it very closely, and in the meantime, Robert, really good to have your opinion on all this. Thank you for that.
My pleasure, Michael. Nice to see you.
And you. Take care.